You're listening to Packers Talk Network. PackersTalk.com.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com Network. I'm your host, Miles Teddick, joined by your co-host, Tim Hamilton. We are diehard Packers fans that just love talking about the Pack. We're not getting into all the national sports media nonsense. We're sticking with real football, and we're talking about the top topics around the Pack every week, breaking down games during the season, sorting through all the drama offseason. If y'all want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. Give us a follow on all the socials and subscribe to the Packers Talk YouTube channel. Those things help us out tremendously. We would love if you would support us. And thank you so much to all the listeners and subscribers who come hang out with us every week. We really appreciate y'all. Before we get going, a few words from our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packers fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packer game tickets, go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. Good evening, Tim. How are we feeling after that win, sir?
Good evening, Miles. Feeling great. Most complete game I think that they've played yet this season. So, really nice win. Nice to not have to sweat one out till the end. And 4-2 on to the Texans. And plenty of things to come off of that game that they're, on a positive note. Lots to clean up still, but definitely headed in the right direction and the best win of the season so far.
Yeah, best win of the season. I think that's an easy one to say. But just really exciting, man. I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't expect the Packers to come even close to a win like that this early in the season. I mean, the Cardinals, they're no pushover. They just beat the 49ers. Talented team, right? We were talking about it last week. Like, there's some talent, right? Like, you've really got to deal with a lot on that offense and that defense. I expected the Packers offense to take a step forward. I did not expect the Packers defense to take a leap forward. Like, the way they looked against the Cardinals, shutting down Harrison Jr., containing Kyler Murray. All around, very, very impressed. Evan Williams, what can you say? We thought we were excited about Javon Bullard. Now here, Evan Williams is not to be forgotten. He's like, hey, I'm here too. So just, man, a ton to be excited about there. And if there's one thing that's maybe not being talked about as much, the offensive line looked dominant. The offensive line is quietly looking like one of the best units in the league right now. So lots to be excited about, man. Lots to be excited about for sure.
Absolutely.
Do you think the problems are solved with Romeo Doubs? Do you think we got over that?
I think at least for 1 week. And I don't think it's anything that most likely will linger all year. I think it's something that they addressed, and we still don't know fully what it was. I think there's a lot of, the initial reporting on it was never kind of shot down. So I think there was an issue there. And some of LaFleur's comments, some of the comments, Christian Watson had made, some comments before the game last week about accepting him again, within the team. So I think it's a combination of things. I think Romeo was going probably through some things, and, I'm not going to knock him for that or criticize anything like that for whatever he was going through. But I also think that there's probably more there as far as whatever his concerns were, whether it was his role or how many targets he was getting or, how he was fitting in. I think that played a part too. So I think it was probably at least a couple of things that led to the, situation the week leading into the Rams game. He was welcome back. The receivers, obviously, when he scored that first touchdown, they all went out there and hugged him and congratulated him. Everything seems good. I don't think it's going to be something that hangs over this team or that is a continual problem with it. So I think they're probably good in that regards. And, he made 2 big plays for him, scored 2 touchdowns, looked good doing it. Those were really nice plays on his part. So welcome back, Romeo, and let's put it behind you and move on, and just forget about it. Keep it going here. Like they're a good team. They're a talented team. They don't need any more distractions. So, I think they're going to be over it. He looked good. The offense, I think overall looked pretty good. It was the most consistent they looked. They're still not where we saw them, I think, the second half of last year, some of those games coming down the stretch, but they're getting there. They're getting closer. It sucks. Dontavian Wicks got hurt. Doesn't seem to be a long-term issue. But yeah, I think they're getting there. You can see the signs of what they can become if they can just find a little more consistency on offense. But like you said, I think the overall play, offense and defense, was really positive. Romeo's return, nice to see. It was nice to see him catch a couple touchdowns like that. I think that makes him feel better, and I think it just kind of lifts that wide receiver room up with him.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I mean, anytime you've got a mistake or anything like that, you want to get back on the horse as fast as you can to put the mistake behind you and to put, something on top of that. And I think not just one, but 2 touchdowns, I think that's an emphatic, just a statement, not even just from Romeo Doubs, but from the whole offense of,
Right.
Hey, he's our guy still. Oh, by the way, he's actually pretty dang good too. So let's not forget all that. And one thing that I would really love to shout out about this whole situation is the leadership from Christian Watson. Now, we've talked about it. The front office is going to have tough decisions to make when it comes to re-signing these receivers and who gets re-signed and who doesn't. It's hard to imagine them re-signing all 4 of your top guys right now. It just doesn't seem realistic. Especially with the way that they're drafting receivers. No reason to give 4 guys a second contract when you can go off and probably find, some rookie contracts in the next few drafts that can produce just as well. So big decisions ahead in the next couple of years. And I think one thing the Packers have showed us is the chemistry in the locker room does matter. Now they've made moves that make us question how much that matters. And I don't think they anticipated letting Aaron Jones go. And there's a lot of conversation probably to be had around that topic. But with Christian Watson, I kind of felt like he led the way, even with his comments before the game and the week leading up to it. He just had a very optimistic mentality, but also there was like a sprinkle of accountability in there. Like, there's something going on, but we're going to handle it. And Rome's our guy, and like just not leaving any room for question there. And I think that is, I don't know, probably a highly underrated trait, a characteristic of a young man, especially because in this day and age, especially with media and everything, they're all looking for blood in the water, right? I mean, something to write about, something to speculate about. And a few people probably got caught last week selling out Rome a little bit earlier than they should have. But yeah, when I look at this whole situation, I think Christian Watson's stance on it and his proactive stance, the way he was proactive about it really helped this thing get resolved quicker. It gave Romeo Doubs what he needed. It was like, hey, you guys don't worry about it. He's our guy. Okay, cool. They got my back. Like he hears that. I just think that all the way around, it seems like it went as well as it could have gone. And, you just can't predict these things. We all talked about it. It was a very shocking development. It's like a guy who's, statistically one of the most involved in the offense is upset with his role in the offense. It's like, well, that's kind of strange. And and we speculated about what that could be. Does he want more downfield opportunities or what? But ultimately, it seems like that's probably about what it was. Is it's like, yeah, look, I get that I'm involved. I'd like to be involved in a different way. Maybe I passionately believe that my skill set can contribute in this other way that could help us win. Whatever it may be, the Packers even said it. They said, look, we got to suspend him, but this is a simple problem to fix and not expected to be a long-term issue. And here we go. You got your answer, your response immediately. The first week he's back with 2 touchdowns. So I loved it. I loved everything about it. The hug after his first touchdown catch. I thought everybody really appreciated that, at least on social media. And, it didn't seem like that was lost on the fans, how symbolic that was. So overall, just a great game, man. What a cool game. And I shout out to Aaron Nagler. He had a funny comment on Twitter that I think was quite appropriate right now. Where I think I wonder if some fans are watching these games to enjoy them or to just be proven right about some pessimistic point of view, maybe. Yeah. And, I can't remember exactly what the guy was that Nagler was calling out, but the point being is like, we should really be watching these things just to enjoy it. Because if you're doing that,
yeah,
I don't know what else you would want out of a game like that. You're at Lambeau, you got, it's getting cloudy and rainy, it's getting cold, and you come in here and they deliver just a total whooping, and we got to see a lot of fun things. One thing you pointed out, we were talking about it before, Tim, is it felt like there was a little bit of a hint of a comeback from the Cardinals, and in the past, the Packers teams probably allowed that to happen and make that more of an interesting game than it should be. And man, they didn't do that in this one. Just slam that door shut. And I don't feel like the offense until probably the last drive or two really took their foot off the gas. I felt like they were still trying to drive that ball.
They were, and I think they put them away with, the touchdown. I think it was Romeo's second touchdown that kind of slammed that door for any kind of comeback. But there's tons of things to improve on from that game. It wasn't perfect, but we've been talking about them winning ugly. Like the Rams game was ugly. It was just like, hey, let's survive. It's tough to win in the NFL. They got to win. Just enjoy it. Now, this one was a little more comfortable, or a lot more comfortable than the Rams game. So I know that there's, still a lot that they can get better at and improve on, but enjoy it. If you can't enjoy this kind of win, and you're looking for things to bitch and moan about, then you really got to check yourself, know, and your fandom. Like, just enjoy it. This was a win that was really never in doubt, and there are things that they have to get better at, certainly, but it's 6 games into the season. Relax a little bit, enjoy it, enjoy when you can have a nice comfortable win. And I thought their offense was pretty consistent throughout the game, and they closed the door when they had to. But I think one of the drives that I liked the most was actually the last drive of the game, where they just took the ball and ran it down their throat and ran the clock off. And that to me was like, okay, it was over by that point. There was the Cardinals weren't coming back, but it was one of those like, okay, let's see if they can hold on to the ball and not have to put their defense back out there. When they're going to be playing prevent and the Cardinals are going to be moving the ball, like, let's just let's keep it on our offense, run the clock out, end this thing. And they had the really nice game-ending drive where they kept them on the ground. We saw, I think at that point they'd taken Jacobs out of. So it was Emmanuel Wilson, it was Chris Brooks, the third back, and they both ran the ball very nicely. And they were able to sit on it. And I think that to me was a nice ending. Really impressed. And, you and I had talked about it before we started talking tonight on our podcast. Was in the past, that's a game where they probably let the Cardinals get a lot closer to them. Mm-hmm. And, Joe Barry's defense would have let them back in the game for sure. Like, I have no doubt about that. And they didn't allow that. And the offense didn't make the mistakes that they made the first half of last season that, definitely would have led to the Cardinals being in that game. So that was encouraging to see. They're taking steps. They're 4-2. Enjoy it. They're in a good spot right now, and it gives them something to build on. We're seeing flashes of what they can be offensively and defensively. Again, they come away with 3 big takeaways on defense with the fumbles this week, which was awesome to see. I think the pass rush was a little better than it had been. I know they didn't have big sack numbers, but part of that was keeping Murray in the pocket and not allowing him to run, which they didn't allow him to run. And that's another step with this defense. Like, they've seen some mobile quarterbacks this year that really haven't hurt them on the ground.
Right.
Hurts maybe had a run or two, but he didn't kill him. Richardson they kept contained, and they certainly kept Kyle Murray contained.
Right.
And that's something this defense has struggled with for a long time. I mean, going back to obviously Dom Capers. So encouraging signs. I'd like to see, a more consistent pass rush, producing results. I'd like to see, a defense that can do more than live off of takeaways, but they're getting them in bunches right now. And I think, you're seeing what they can be defensively as they figure out their personnel and how they use them, which Hafley is obviously doing now. He's mixing and matching. We're going to talk about that. But yeah, definitely encouraging signs and a lot to build off of going into a really tough matchup coming up with Houston.
Yeah, that's we got to get into that, and we will here in a few minutes. But that's going to be a tough one, and I'm super encouraged by the way they played this week. You hope that they can carry that over, but if they play like they did against the Cardinals, they should win against the Texans. I mean, and you can't do a whole lot of this game-to-game comparison. The Vikings played the Texans, and this is how that went, and then we played the Vikings. Teams are just they match up differently, so it's hard to make those types of comparisons. But when you see how the Vikings were dominant against the Texans, and then you see how the Packers played the Vikings and looked about as bad as you could look for basically a half of football, and then should have won the game if your kicker makes kicks. So I don't know. The Packers to me seem like they're firing on a higher level right now than the Texans. I looked at these teams very similarly coming into the season. A lot of high potential, young talent. Both I assumed might stumble at the start before they got going, and I feel like the Packers are getting their stride before the Texans are. We're not there yet. We're still enjoying this Cardinals win. Let's we got some of our commenters here joining us this evening. Mike Hughes, thanks for joining us, Mike. Go Pack, go indeed. Best secondary we've had in a long time. Yeah, hard to argue with that. With that. We went from having the safety position probably being the worst position on the team to now might be one of the best and deepest. It's what a group, man.
The safety play has just been, a complete change from what it was last season.
Absolutely.
Just Xavier McKinney, obviously, he's been playing at an all-pro level. It's a shame he didn't get another interception, but you can't get one every week, I guess. But the play of the rookies, like we've seen Bullard flash plays. Now we're seeing it. Evan Williams making plays. Like they got to get those guys on the field, both of them at the same time. And I think Hafley's figuring out ways. We saw Evan Williams play against the Rams the whole game. And now yesterday, he had a big role again. Bullard went from playing the slot against the Rams to more of a traditional safety. But those guys, they're playing too good to take either one of them off the field.
Right.
So, and that's something we really should talk about too, is just how they've been mixing and matching the personnel. And that's going to be really interesting going forward as far as like who their best 4 or 5 guys are. Like they talk about their best 5 on the offensive line. Who's the best 5 in the secondary right now? Like Evan Williams is just making too many plays. He's always around the ball. He's always doing the right thing. You got to have him on the field. The punch out for the fumble was awesome. That's Charles Tillman right there. We saw all those years.
Heads up play, man.
But to me, my favorite play that he made was the tackle on Kyler Murray when he kept it. And, I think it was 3rd and short. And it was really him. And if he doesn't make that play, Murray's got the first down and probably a big gain. And he was patient, stayed with him, waited for him, and brought him down. Great play behind the line of scrimmage. I don't want to call out safeties of the past, but safeties of the past wouldn't have made that tackle from Green Bay.
There's very few.
Not the recent past, right? So, just he's so good. And Bullard's versatility, being able to play at safety, being able to play the slot. And, he's made plays, maybe obviously he's not as many flash plays as McKinney or Williams, but kid's been solid and he's quick to fire to the ball, which again is an improvement over what they had last season. The safety play is just incredibly improved. And then figuring out the pieces at corner now, Jair's back. They really love Keyshawn Nixon. Like the dude, they're playing him an outside corner. They're moving him the slot, but we've seen him play more outside corner the last 2 weeks than he's really ever played since he's been in Green Bay, and he's holding up pretty good. I'm not a believer in it. I'm very skeptical of it, but I got to give him credit. He's holding up well for now. So yeah, I think going forward, it's going to be interesting what they do. Didn't see Valentine get any defensive snaps yesterday, which I think is very surprising. I hope that's not something that continues. But right now, Keyshawn's ahead of Valentine. He's ahead of Stokes. Stokes only got, I think, a handful of snaps. Um, playing on defense yesterday. So it's interesting how they're kind of figuring out who they like the most and which spots they like him in. That because we've only seen Keyshawn Nixon play the slot. We're seeing him play outside corner now. Going to be interesting, how they mix and match these guys going forward.
Yeah.
And you can throw a linebacker in there too. We finally see Cooper played more snaps than Isaiah McDuffie yesterday for the first time all year. So, we're seeing more Cooper, which everybody's wanted. So we're getting him. He, not every snap. He's not in there every play yet, but it's getting closer now. And he's seems like he's obviously ahead of Eric Wilson, and based on the game against the Cardinals, he's ahead of McDuffie at least for 1 week. We'll see if that continues.
Well, if his PFF grade is any indication, his stock needle is straight up. He's actually currently ranked the 8th linebacker in the NFL right now on PFF. And we always take PFF with a grain of salt, but when it's when it's a positive thing, we call attention to it. But yeah, absolutely. There's some interesting developments coming on the defense now, and that's why I was surprised by the leap in progress that they showed this week, especially against a Cardinals offense that presents some issues, right? I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. is pretty darn good, and Kyler Murray, pretty darn good. We're not calling him Tom Brady, but the man can move. He can cause you problems. So yeah. It's an offensive loaded with issues there, and the defense handled it.
Yeah, I mean, it helped that Harrison got knocked out of the game too. I mean, that certainly changed things, but you still got Kyler Murray, and dude can make plays with his legs and his arm, and made very few of those on Sunday, and they definitely kept them in the pocket, which is, again, it's something that defenses of the past, man, when you saw a running quarterback on the schedule, it was scary because you knew he was going to make some big plays against you, and the Packers weren't going to be able to stop him from running. So far this year, they've
PTSD from Kaepernick.
I mean, go back a couple of years when they played Hurts on a Sunday night, which was the game that Jordan Love came in. He ran all over them. I mean, they couldn't stop running quarterbacks. And now this year, they've done a really nice job containing them. And Kyler Murray, they shut him down as far as, what he was able to do with his legs. So impressive. And even the run defense, it needs to get better. It needs to show a lot more than it did, but it was improved. It did a better job. They didn't get hammered on the ground by James Conner, which it's encouraging. So
he's a good player, right? I mean, he's not a slouch you can just ignore.
Right. And I think they're still figuring things out on defense, what they want to be, how they want to use their guys. But it's encouraging. There's some progress there. There's some steps where you can figure it out. The pass rush has been a concern. It's been a disappointment. It hasn't, other than Tennessee where they had a bunch of sacks, they really haven't done much in the pass rush. Now, I think part of that was they did play some mobile quarterbacks, and I think their plan was like they had to keep them in the pocket. Like, don't let them get outside. Don't be flying up the field. Don't give them gaps to run through. So I think it was more of a contained rush. But I also think their pass rushers have disappointed, just haven't gotten the job done. They were a little better against the Cardinals. I know the sack numbers, won't show that, but I think you got to look at the pressures. And I think you also got to give it a little bit more time in this defense and figuring out how to use their guys and the players figuring out in this new scheme how they can attack upfield. So I think a little more patience with the pass rush. I know it's been frustrating, and it certainly has to turn around for this defense going forward, but there were some signs of it on Sunday against the Cardinals, so that's encouraging.
Yeah, and our guy Chris good to see you, Chris. Glad you're with us this evening. Says, guys, are we worried about the lack of pressure from the front four? Yeah, and I think Tim nailed it. I think if you look at who you've played up to this point, it's more mobile quarterbacks than not. I mean, you got Sam Darnold. Who else? That's Stafford. Levis is kind of an athlete, though. I mean, he's not known for, but he can get going. Yeah, I mean, you've had really Stafford and Darnold that are not mobile quarterbacks. The rest, you got to contain them. You know, that's a part of the offense you have to account for. And I made the comment before, and I've seen this several weeks, and I'm no D-line guru or defensive guru or any kind of guru for that matter. But what it looks like to me is you've got these guys and they're getting great penetration. They're getting upfield. You can see it. They're winning these one-on-one matchups. They're getting going, but it's almost being used against them in a lot of cases. And I've seen several where it was directly used against them in trap situations. And so that's where I would agree with you, man. Give it patience, because I don't think these guys are demonstrating an inability to be good at their job. You're not seeing Rashawn Gary just get whooped, right? Like that's not what we're seeing here. You know, if you just saw him getting worked and blown off the line and, just held in check all the time, like that'd be different. I mean, the guy is still getting after it. He's like, when I watch reps of Rashawn Gary, he doesn't look like somebody I would want to stand across from, and try to keep from my quarterback. It doesn't look like a fun assignment.
No.
And so what I would draw comparisons to there and say, let's have some patience with the situation is it's similar to Christian Watson last season and somewhat this season, which is if you're going to send the guy downfield and he's going to take 3 DBs, just do that. You don't have to throw him the ball. If he's going to take 3 DBs with him, just send him down the field and open up the others underneath. And they've shown plenty of willingness to do that. Not to take anything away from what Jaden Reed has done, but that certainly has contributed and helped him be as successful as he has. And so I think there's an element of that with Rashawn Gary. I think he's still seeing a lot of double teams, but he's going to draw your best assignment, and he's a guy that they are game planning around, right? Like every offense sees him and goes, all right, we can't, like, this guy is tough. We cannot let him beat us. We'll roll the dice on Slayton or some of these other guys. So that's what I think's happening, and I don't think that's going to last. Personally, I think that Hafley's going to figure out ways to get Gary unleashed, and I think we started to see a little bit of it in this game. He got some pressures, and he was definitely a factor in the backfield. So I'm not worried yet. I'll say that. I'd say you got to have patience with that front four. Let's figure out what they're going to be good at and how they're going to do it. You're starting to see the secondary gel. You're starting to see the linebackers gel. I think the D-line comes with that, and I think it'll start to look a lot better.
Yeah, I think patience. It's been a disappointment. It's been a concern so far, the lack of pass rush, but I think they need a little more time in the system, and I think there's different things playing into it. I will say 2 things. I feel like sometimes watching the Packers, between either the pass rush or the run defense, they must lead the league in missed tackles behind the line of scrimmage. Like where somebody's breaking through, whether it's Kenny Clark or one of the defensive tackles against the run, one of the linebackers, and they just fly by the running back, or they miss the tackle, or they miss sacks. Like they miss a lot. If they could finish, that would be key. Also, Devontae Wyatt's missed a couple of games now, and he was playing some good football for him. So getting him back will help the pass rush.
Very true.
And the other thing is, I wonder if as they get away from mobile quarterbacks, if we're going to see their blitz rate go up, because I believe going into the Monday night game, they were like 30th in the league as far as the amount of times they sent pressure.
Mm-hmm.
But they've had some nice pressure. Like when they brought Cooper, he's generate pressures, he's generate sacks. Keyshawn Nixon had a big strip sack against Arnold. I wonder if they start bringing some more blitzes and some more pressure on them. I think they need to. I think, at times they really should, but I also think they're it's a combination of they're nervous about letting these mobile quarterbacks get out. And then, they played Stafford and they were down Jair. They were, being shorthanded in the secondary. They played Minnesota, Corey Ballantyne's out there. So I think they were worried about exposing those corners. If they can have some stability in the secondary, you're not playing mobile quarterbacks, maybe it's time for Hafley to start dialing up the blitz a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. And I think that that's what we'll see. And we can't forget that this defense is just 6 games into this new system, right? And it's not just like a tiny adjustment and, it's the same core system with some – no, I mean, they fundamentally changed a lot of things about what they do. So while and I know the one talking point has been, well, guys stay in nickel most of the time anyway. So 3-4, 4-3, what does it matter? yes, I hear you. You're right as far as application goes, but in terms of a system, you're still installing something that's fundamentally different from what they were doing the last 3 years. So terminology is going to be different. Uh, I mean, personnel packages, formations, all of that's going to be to audibles. All of that's going to be fundamentally different from what they were doing before, even though what happens on the field might still end up being 80% nickel. Even within that, the stuff that you're doing is going to be fundamentally different from what it was with Joe Barry. So there's a lot of learning curve that we're just not even going to see. You know what I mean?
Right.
And in that, Halfley I would imagine, doesn't want to rush his guys. You don't want to throw too much at your guys. And he did openly say that coming into the season. You don't want to make them think too much. You don't want to overwhelm them with too much to make a decision about. You want them to be able to read and react, and that's how players on defense especially play their fastest. And so I think you've probably seen some reservation on Halfley's part in what they're calling, what they're installing, just what they're, like you're saying, he hasn't quite dialed up the blitzes, but I don't think it's because he's not going to, you know what I mean? So all of that. And yeah, I mean, when you look at the situations they were in, your starting quarterback being out changes the whole game plan across the entire team. So there's 2 weeks to account for.
Right.
And then when you analyze the opponents, we've said week 1 is kind of just a wild card on itself. Being out of the country, week 1's always kind of a little cluster anyway. There's just a lot of figuring stuff out, knocking rust off, all this stuff. Week 1 is just a wild card. You can check that away. So really, you're talking about week 4, 5, and 6 right now, and that's where it looks pretty good to me. I mean, I get it that I believe in that. That's still one of the loss to the Vikings, but the 2 games after that have looked amazing, right? And I shouldn't say amazing, but you're going in the right direction, right? And this last game was amazing. So yeah, I still think this team is very much working out some of the kinks and learning some new things in their systems and stuff like that. And I'm excited to see what it looks like when this thing is really humming, because I don't think that they've scratched the surface yet.
No, they don't. And they're showing positive signs, and it's 6 games into a new scheme. So it takes time. Just be patient and hope they continue to build, because there have been positive signs. There's also plenty of things they need to get better at and clean up, but it's heading in the right direction. So let's just see what it can become.
Yeah. Well, real quick, before we go on to the Texans matchup and start talking about that, we'll hit the comments. A couple shout outs to our friends here. Our buddy Matthew Tan. Good to see you, sir. I think we're on the right track. I think so too. I do. Weather does play a major factor in the games. You're right. So that rain, I think, had a factor, but it was good to see the Packers respond the way that they did, because that should be their element. And then we've got Robert Jr. Langley. Hi, Robert. Yeah, good to see you. Got a nice Mario picture there. That's cool. And then Dan Ripple. We need a Coop cheer for Cooper. He's on the field. Good things happening. Absolutely. Hey, so if y'all are listening and headed to Lambeau at all the rest of the season, Dan's got a point. Let's get that Coop thing going. I think that really plays.
Absolutely.
And then one more from our buddy Matthew Chan. Jeff Halfley is going to make CJ Stroud run and hide. Man, I hope you're right. I really do. He can. I think the Texans have some vulnerabilities, but we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. Real quick, before we move on, we always buzz through the PFF grades just to kind of tell you who played well, who didn't. Again, some of these, take it with a grain of salt. We do not take PFF as gospel. It's just a nice measure to conversate about, really, is what it comes down to. But the offense, on the offensive side of the ball, specifically in the Cardinals game, your highest graded player was Zach Tom. He had an 88, pretty high PFF score, followed by Ben Sims, Andrew Beck, Josh Jacobs, and coming at number 5, Jordan Love. Some solid grades there. Shout out to Ben Sims for having an elite pass blocking grade. Passing grade. Sorry. He just had a good game in the passing game. So shout out to our backup tight ends there. And then the bottom of the offense this week, fifth from the bottom, we've got Rasheed Walker. Then we've got Elgton Jenkins, then Jordan Morgan, Tucker Kraft, and Malik Heath. So not names we like to see on the bottom of the list. There's probably room to say that they didn't play as poorly as PFF has graded them, especially the offensive line. I thought they did pretty well in this game. But hey, there you go. There's your PFF grades on the offense from the Cardinals game. On the defense, this one's pretty fun, especially at the top here. So your top graded, no surprise here, Evan Williams with an elite 93.3, followed by Carl Brooks, also an elite 93. And then at number 3, Rashawn Gary. So PFF thought he had a pretty good game. Edgerrin Cooper comes in at 4, and Jair Alexander comes in at 5. Some solid grades there at the top. And then on the bottom for the defense this week, Isaiah McDuffie, Quay Walker, Preston Smith, Kenny Clark, and Lucas Van Ness. Ooh, rough. He has a 30 there. Van Ness not having a good game. I have to go back and look and see how he did. I didn't see that. But apparently he didn't have a good game. But overall, again, it's hard not to be excited and pleased about that Cardinals game. And Tim, is it safe to say that the NFC North is the best division in football?
Right now, it sure is. Yeah, I mean, top to bottom. I don't know.
Do you remember a time that they've been better?
It's probably been a while. I mean, off the top of my head, no, because there always seems like there's at least one team that's just a doormat.
One stinker, yeah.
Right. I mean, you'd have to go back and do some research on that. I'm not sure, but recently, I can't think of a time.
All 4 teams have a winning record.
Yeah, and they've all been impressive at different times. You know, it's 6 games into the season. The Lions and Vikings have played 5 because they both had their byes. But yeah, they've all been impressive. I would say I think they're mostly legit. That team in Chicago, I'm still not sold on, but it's I know we like to make fun of the Bears fans. I don't think this is the week to do that because they still suck, but they've won a couple games, and it's not against good competition, but it's who they're playing. It's who's on their schedule, and they've played well against them. Caleb Williams has looked good. I think the real test for them is going to come up pretty soon here. I think in November they get, I believe it's 3 divisional games in a row. So we'll find out a lot more about the Bears. But
I mean, basically, I think it's after this week their schedule gets a lot
up. Yeah,
it does. There's not a lot of room for breaks in there.
Right. And I think the Vikings, they've been good. I think they're a little bit, I want to say over their heads as far as what I don't
overperforming a little.
Yeah, overperforming. Right.
Yeah.
I think their defense is really good, but I think the more film that teams get on that defense and what they do, I think you're going to see once they run into some veteran quarterbacks along the way, they're going to have some answers for their blitzes and for their looks. And that kind of is what happened last season as the year went on. If you remember the second Packer game, New Year's Eve, the Packers diced up that defense. But I think they're going to be in contention for a wild card berth for a division title all season. I think the Lions are good. I think, they blew out the Cowboys. It was a national TV game, so everybody's, saying how great they looked. I've seen them a couple games this year where, they struggled to beat the Cardinals. Week 1, they beat the Rams in overtime, where the Rams were losing offensive linemen throughout that game.
Right.
And the Lions had to tie it, I think, right at the end of regulation, and then they won it in overtime. So the record's 4-1. They, I'm not going to argue that, but I don't think they've looked like world beaters. Like, they destroyed the Cowboys, but they've had some struggles in some of the other games. And the Aiden Hutchinson injury.
Oh, horrific. If you haven't seen it, don't
watch it. But I mean, Aiden Hutchinson, he's their best defensive player. He might be their best player.
Yes.
And he's done for the year. And
no doubt.
That's going to be huge. Like, he was their pass rush. Like, there's no other guy, you're not going to have 2 Aiden Hutchinsons, but he was their pass rusher. Like they're not very good at rushing the passer if he's not wreaking havoc.
Well, stopping him last year was one of the keys to the Packers beating them at the end of that Thanksgiving game.
Yeah, he's a game wrecker, and you're not going to go out and trade for that, unless the Browns decide to trade you Myles Garrett or Max Crosby from the Raiders. I don't think either one of those moves are realistic. So we'll see. I mean, maybe they can find somebody in a trade. They got a little bit of time here before the trade deadline, but if he's going to be out for the year, I don't know how they're going to make up for that or come close to making up for that with their pass rush. So you're going to see a little bit of drop off with their defense. I think their offense looks really good right now, but the key is getting pressure on Goff. So to me, I think the Lions are still a team that's going to be a playoff team, potentially win a division, potentially go deep into the playoffs. But that Aiden Hutchinson injury, that's huge. And that changes things a lot. But they're a good team. Obviously, we talk about the Packers. So, yeah, I mean, to answer your question, it's the best division in football right now. 2 months from now, we'll see. But I think at least 3 of these teams are legit playoff caliber teams.
Yeah, I agree. I'm still skeptical about the Bears.
Yeah.
Their wins are not against great competition. So, but when they did, well, I think the Packers have more impressive wins. We don't have to split hairs. This will get decided. But
right. Packers won 2 games with a backup quarterback who had been there for 3 weeks. So
yeah.
Those are impressive wins.
There's definitely some context there that matters, which the Bears fans that I love, they know that. But yeah, so I do think it's the best division in football, but I don't think it's as good as it's advertising right now. Obviously, there's going to be some cannibalization. Teams got to play each other, and somebody's got to lose. So that'll happen. Yeah, the Aiden Hutchinson thing is a big wrench in that whole situation. Being a 4-1 team, we're going to find out how serious the Lions are about contending this season, because when you're 4-1, you're playing the way you are. I mean, you've almost got to play as if this is your window, right? I mean, even though you lose one of your best players, if there ever is a time to go ahead and make a dramatic trade for a Max Crosby, now's the time. I mean, you're 4-1. You're in the the front of a playoff race, and you're the Lions. I mean, shoot, man, it's not like you can be like, well, we'll go get them next year. We're always in it. This is some rare territory for the Lions and Lions fans. I mean, I get it. The last couple of years they've been good, but before that, it's been a total drought. So
they've been a doormat.
Yeah. And so that's where I'm looking at. If I'm a Lions fan right now, I'm looking at the front office going, yo, you better move. You better do something. We are 4-1. We have got as much of a contender as anybody else in the league. And now we lose our best player. You can't just sit on that. Like, you got to do something. Like, do something.
We'll see. I think they will. I don't think they can get enough of a difference maker to replace him, but maybe they can get somebody who's at least decent and they can scheme around it and other guys step up. Like, I think their defense is improved because they got better at cornerback, but now you lose Hutchinson, that changes things. And I think they're going to need to rely a lot more on their offense, which certainly looks capable. I mean, they have some playmakers. I know Jared Goff gets knocked a lot, but he's a pretty solid quarterback.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Right. I mean, he had a really nice year for them. Now, I know NFC Championship game, he makes some mistakes and it gets magnified and everything like that. You have to get pressure on him. They have a really good offensive line too. But I think with losing Hutchinson, I think there's a lot more pressure on their offense. They have the playmakers, it seems like, and they have some, 2 running backs. They got 2 receivers that are clicking now, and the tight end, Laporta. They got a really strong offensive line, but they might be a team that has to win some shootouts along the way. I also wonder too, like, they had an early bye week. The Vikings had an early bye week. Like, how does that factor in as we go along throughout the season? Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't mean anything, but that could, it could be a factor in December. Like, how much gas is left in the tank and where are they with injuries and when they play certain teams? Because I just have a feeling with the Packers, they've survived some games. They've won some ugly games. Look good against
backup quarterback.
Right. Look good against the Cardinals, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. I feel like they're a second half team. Like they're kind of that, like they're building to something. Like you don't want to be playing your best football in October. You want to be playing it in December and January. And it reminds me, and I'm not making this comparison, I'm just saying it reminds me. Mike Holmgren's teams a lot of times were second half teams, right? They would kind of spot it, not the Super Bowl year, they were a full season team, but some of those other playoff years, they would kind of like get by, they'd win some game, and then they would just take off. And that's when they had the great runs at Lambeau in December and January and November. But they were kind of like a second half like team through the season. And I feel like this team, like it's building to that where they can hopefully find that consistency and be better down the stretch. And, maybe the injuries in Detroit and having these early bye weeks for the Vikings and the Lions. And I think the Vikings playing a little above their heads right now, overachieving. Maybe that catches up to them, and the Packers catch up to them in December by playing better football. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see.
It's a long way to go.
All bets are off. There's a lot of football left to play, but I mean, the Vikings I thought they were going to be a doormat this season. So the fact that they are where they are, you gotta pay attention to that. And I don't know that it's sustainable. I do think, and I think the NFC North in general, we're going to go through a little bit of a gauntlet and be tested and, like I said, cannibalize a little bit. But ultimately, what we've seen the Packers overcome at this point in the season, they're battle tested, man. Like they've faced adversity now. You're 6 games in the season and you've faced adversity without your starting quarterback, and you've overcome that. You've faced adversity in the locker room with one of your best players taking off, just going AWOL, and your immediate response is, well, we'll win without him, but then we'll also win emphatically with him. And so, man, that's a tough thing to go up against. Anybody that's playing this Packers team, you're going to get a rowdy group that just doesn't quit. These guys don't know how to quit. I've been saying that now for 2 years, and the further we go, the more we see it. They don't quit. And I think that aligns with what you're saying, Tim, as far as being a second half team. Sometimes in the first half, it really is just about, throwing some jabs, surviving some punches, figure some things out, and then, get in there at halftime going, all right, I think here's where we've got some advantages to take, to get ahead here, and taking those shots and
figure out who you are.
Exactly. And figure out what it's going to take. Don't be in too much of a hurry. Don't get ahead of yourself. Don't force yourself into mistakes, but figure out what it's going to take to beat your opponent and then beat them. All right. Don't just kind of play with them a little bit and hope that you can pull it out at the last second. Again, leave no doubt. I think that was something that I was really happy to see against the Cardinals. And we already mentioned it, is that, it looked like there could have been a little bit of a comeback, and then the Packers left no doubt after that. And so I think, or I guess I shouldn't say, I think there's a lot left, but what I'd love to see is that the Packers play that out and continue on sort of a nice incline as they start to figure out the defense and get better on the offense. And obviously we're biased here. This is the Packers weekly podcast. We think that they're going to come in first, win the division, maybe a first round bye. We'll see. But all in all, yes, the NFC North is the best division in football. So let's talk about it now and how we think it's going to go up against the AFC South and the Texans. Tim. Oh, here. Sorry. Winning solves a lot of problems. That was one I had. All right. Shootout against the Texans. Is this a shootout waiting to happen?
Maybe. It could be. I could see that. I also could see it being like one of those mid-20s type of games, like not quite a shootout. I think it's definitely a close game. These are two teams that are kind of similar. Like they haven't blown a whole lot of teams out. They've kind of survived. The Texans have survived against, the Jaguars and the Colts. They had trouble beating both of those teams. They got blown out up in Minnesota. They beat the Bears, but their defense looked really good. The offense kind of didn't really click too much in that game. They beat Buffalo. It was a game they probably outplayed Buffalo by more than the score, but it was still a close game. So, they haven't like wowed you, I guess. Like, played a complete game where they just annihilate teams, but they've won. They're 5-1, so you can't argue with that.
Right.
Yeah, I think the potential's there for a shootout. I'm not quite sure if we're going to see one of those, 35-31 kind of games. I think we're going to see kind of mid-20s, but definitely one possession game. I think it's a one possession fourth quarter game that, goes down to the wire. Teams that are kind of similar to each other, too. You got the young stud quarterbacks who can make some just incredible throws. I mean, CJ Stroud makes some throws where you got to like look at people who are posting new all 22s, because watching him make some of these throws from different angles, the angle behind the quarterback, it's just so impressive than what you're seeing on the TV copy. But he's really good. Obviously, Jordan Love's, especially now as he gets further away from the knee injury and gets healthier. And then I think they play defense, or they want to play defense in the Packers case, in a similar way, which is attacking, rush the quarterback, but swarm to the ball, this fast attacking defense that, puts pressure on you. When somebody catches the ball, you have four guys that are there trying to tackle you and rip the ball out. They want to pressure the quarterback. So I think they're very similar teams. It's an exciting game. I think it's a real cool matchup here, for middle of the season matchup. I don't think it's like one of these huge games because it's just too early in the year and it's an AFC opponent, but it's a real cool kind of early season measuring stick game. Texans are good. They're a really good team. We all know about CJ Stroud. Packers catch a break though. Nico Collins, their number one stud receiver, is out. He's on injured reserve. They were able to win without him against New England. New England's, not that good of an opponent. But they're 1-0 without him. It helps the Packers a lot not to have him in there, obviously. And we're going to see Stephon Diggs, our old friend from Minnesota. He still can play. He's still good, not quite at the level that he was in Minnesota or his first couple of years in Buffalo. But he's their top guy. Tank Dell, the undersized receiver, and they got Joe Mixon back, who had been out for several weeks. He had a big game against New England. They can do a lot of different things. They run a Shanahan style system, so you're going to see a lot of play action, quarterback movement. You're going to see what we see when we play the Niners, really, and similarities to what the Packers do in their offense. So, but they catch a big break without Nico Collins there. That could be the deciding factor in the game, is that they just don't have enough playmakers on offense to match the Packers. And then I think the Texan defense, they're fast. They play to the ball. DeMeco Ryans has those guys flying around. And then they have Will Anderson as a stud pass rusher. They added Donnell Hunter, who was in Minnesota for a long time. Packer fans very familiar. So you got both those guys on the edges. That's a huge, huge test for Zach Tom and Rasheed Walker. Will Anderson had a big game against New England.
Now, we mentioned getting a break on the offensive side of the ball with Nico Collins. They get a slight break on the defensive side of the ball, too. Defensive tackle Mario Edwards Jr. is suspended for 4 games.
Yeah, that came down on Monday. But they do get Danico Autry back, who hasn't played. He's been suspended, I think, for the first 6 games of the season. He's a veteran. Packers fans probably don't know because he played with the Colts, he played with the Titans. We don't see him much, but he's a real versatile guy that can play edge, can play defensive tackle. He's had a real nice career, older guy. So they lose Edwards, but they get Autry back for this game. So, maybe it's not that much of a factor for Houston, but yeah, they do lose Edwards this week. But really solid defense. Derek Stingley, he was a high draft pick at quarterback. Mm-hmm. He's played well for him. Their 2 safeties, Jimmy Ward, who used to play for the Niners. Petrie, who was a second-round pick a couple of years ago. He's a nice player. So, yeah, they're good on both sides of the ball. Watching them earlier in the year against the Bears, and then a couple of weeks ago against Buffalo, I was more impressed by their defense and how sound they look on defense, and they look like a DeMeco Ryans defense from the Niners, what the Niners had under Robert Saleh when he was there. Like, they played the exact same way, and it's a copy of what those defenses were. It was really impressive. And then obviously you throw in CJ Stroud and what he's able to do. So yeah, this is the best team the Packers have seen so far.
Yeah, I
think.
mean, short of the Vikings, I think the Vikings.
Yeah, I think long term, this is the better team for the season. I think at the Vikings, when they got the Vikings, really impressive, but Houston's right there with them. I know they got blown out by Minnesota, but they're just as good as what the Vikings are.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was talking about earlier in the episode. Is I feel like the Texans are. I mean, they seem to me like one of the teams that's going to make a deep run in the AFC playoffs. Certainly thought that coming into the season. You know, watching them get it handed to them by the Vikings, and then they've had some of these other wins that are a little closer. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say they have struggled a little bit in comparison to what you think they would have done going into the season. But yeah, make no mistake about the potential of this team. Like there's talent across the roster. The leadership seems as good as any, right? I mean, D'Amico Ryan seems like an excellent head coach. No doubt about his defensive system and just capabilities there. So yeah, this is a tough test for sure. What I do find interesting is that, two of the teams that Houston struggled the most against are NFC North teams. So the Bears and the Vikings, and we'll see. Is the NFC North that much better than any other division? That's going to play out. We'll find out. I don't know that I believe that. I will say I'm glad this game's at Lambeau. Kind of like the Cardinals game. I'm glad this game's at Lambeau. I think that the Packers have a much better, just a much better mindset when they're playing at Lambeau. You can almost feel it at this point. These guys like playing at home. They feel more natural at home. It seems like they start faster at home. So I'm glad that this game is there and not down in Houston. But yeah, I think that this is a big challenge. They're definitely one of the best teams you've faced so far. I mean, you can make the argument about the Vikings and how good the Vikings were when the Packers played the Vikings. But yeah, I mean, just from a talent perspective and an overall potential perspective, yeah, this is the best team you've played so far, I think.
I think there's a lot of similarities to where they are and where they could potentially be to what the Packers are. Like there's a lot of
parallels,
right?
Yeah,
like you could see both these teams playing deep into January.
Well, and I don't think it'd be surprising for this to be a Super Bowl matchup.
Could be, yeah. I mean, it's
just throwing that out there.
Maybe we get the rematch in New Orleans.
Rematch in New Orleans, all right. Yeah, I mean that would be appropriate, right? You get one in the North, one in the South.
There you go.
New Orleans is virtually a home game for Houston. But yeah, you do. You have your work cut out here for you, and just I feel totally different about this game. I shouldn't say totally, but I feel a lot different about this game this week after having seen how they played against the Cardinals versus what I thought about it last week going into the Cardinals. I felt like going into that game still felt like you were figuring some things out. What offense is going to show up? What defense is going to show up? The way they responded to the Cardinals game and the way they came out, it just doesn't seem like there's any reason that wouldn't carry over, right? I don't think that there was just a specific matchup the Packers were able to abuse against the Cardinals. I think that they just beat them. So, yeah, I mean, I feel confident that the Packers can win this game, but I do feel like this has the makings of a shootout. Now, without Nico Collins, I think there's a lower chance of that because, yeah, you got Diggs and you got Tank Dell, but I think the Packers have the DBs to hang with those guys. Even Robert Woods is out. Never mind. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that the firepower and from the receiver group of the Texans without Nico Collins is all that intimidating. I'm not saying they're bad, right? It's certainly not the worst group you faced. I think the Rams probably take that. But I don't think that this is nearly the challenge that you had against the Vikings.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I also think you gotta be concerned a little bit about the run game because they could hit you with that. And Joe Mixon, he had a big week. Yeah, he had a big week one. Had a big game against New England. I think most of it, or not most of it, but he had like a 50-plus yard run against New England, so that maybe inflated his stats a little bit. and he's been hurt in between. But they could commit to the run game. I think you're going to see a lot of play action, run game as well, because it's a Shanahan system, but I think that's what they could probably do against the Packers is run the ball on them and then go play action and expose the middle of the field, expose the Packers linebackers who have struggled in coverage. So I think that's where it could open up for Houston. And then, Stiggs is still good. He's not, number one stud receiver like he used to be, but he's still very capable. And they can also scheme things open for him and Tank Dell because, they do a really nice job with their system, with their game planning, with their scheme, and the way that, Bobby Slowick calls it as the offensive coordinator. So, yeah, I could see a shootout in the Packers needing to put up some points against them.
Yeah, and then you said one thing in there that I think will determine a lot of how this game goes, and the coin toss might have a factor, but if they can commit to the run, right? So if the Packers can come out and score quick, and jump up on them, I think that controls the game a lot. As far as what the Texans can do, whether they can commit to Joe Mixon or not, and whether you make them more one-dimensional. If you make the Texans one-dimensional in this game, I think the Packers win by 2 scores.
Wow. Okay.
I don't think that the Texans have the firepower, and I think that you saw that against the Vikings. I just don't think they have the firepower to overcome this Packers secondary. I personally think the Packers secondary is superior to the Vikings secondary at this point. Harrison Smith's a heck of a safety, but the rest of their secondary there's questions. But yeah, without Nico Collins, it definitely is a less intimidating group. And as long as, and again, I said that this is a different challenge than what you had against the Vikings. You were without 2 of your top 3 corners against the Vikings, right? If you got Jair in there, you got Stokes healthy, you got, I think Valentine's back, right? They were slow to bring him in.
He played a lot against the Rams, and then they didn't put him. He didn't play a single defensive snap against the Cardinals. So I don't know what the plan is there as far as how they're going to divvy up the snaps at cornerback opposite Jair. But I mean, Nixon's been playing outside. He's been playing slot, and it seems like they like Stokes still a little better than Valentine. I don't see it. I'd rather see Valentine in there. I think he's the better player right now, but maybe it changes.
It may also depend on what you're trying to match up against. I think one thing that Stokes offers, similar to like what you had with Sam Shields, you can put him on a fast guy, and the fast guy's not going to run away from him. You know what I mean? And I think that's in itself, whether you're a good DB or not, and not to say that Sam Shields wasn't. He was a good DB. But, when he was a young DB and had all that speed, he was able to rely heavily on that speed and not have to worry as much about his fundamentals. And that was a huge asset against the likes of like a Mike Wallace and some of those guys like Deshaun Jackson. And that was a huge part of the Packers being able to win that Super Bowl back in 2010, is just having a body next to one of those speed guys so that they can't just run wild and down the field. So Stokes to me is that guy in your secondary right now that you can put on a guy and he's not going to be able to run away from Stokes. But I mean, Stephon Diggs is not that guy. He's a great receiver, but he's no Tyreek Hill, right? He's not running away from your DBs at this point. Tank Dell's fast, but I don't think he's that fast. So I don't think you have anybody who's really scaring your DBs vertically without Nico Collins. But these are good receivers, right? Like you can't just say because they can't beat you vertically, they're just not going to be good. These are guys who are very, very good at finding space. They're going to be very frustrated. I mean, we've seen how many times Stephon Diggs with the Vikings, and he's very good on 3rd down about finding that opening and getting that first down. And that is one of the most frustrating things to deal with. And that's what I think that the test of this secondary is in this game. It's not capping the big plays like you've had to against some other teams. It's going to be, can you get off the field? Because these guys, these receivers, they're excellent route runners. They're excellent at finding space. They're excellent at possessing the ball. And if you can't get off the field on third down, that's going to wear you out. Like, that's going to be tough. And to me, that's the biggest challenge for this defense.
That's a good point. I could see this being a game where there's a lot of drives that are 8, 9, 10 plays. And it's maybe the score is not, 38-35, but it because they have to go so many plays to score, but it almost feels like a shootout, but it's a lower, somewhere in the 20s sort of game, just because the possessions are limited because of the long drives. But I could see that being what plays out.
And Stroud's going to be good at getting the ball in those spaces too. And I think that's something that's an important detail in that equation. But no, I do think that the Packers have the edge in this one. I mean, again, being at Lambeau is an edge at this point, but the Packers offense is really firing right now, and it doesn't look like there's any signs of slowing down. And maybe that's the sign that it's going to slow down. I don't know. But just what we saw this week was a great example against the Cardinals of pick your poison, which is what I thought the real danger of this offense was, the real threat coming into the season is it truly is pick your poison. You've got playmakers at every position, and the defense has to make decisions about how they're going to go and try to stop that. And then you have the pieces to counter it. If they're going to just drop deep and not let you get over top of them, fine. Send Watson to take some attention and just work underneath all day, or vice versa. If they're going to sit in man, let Christian Watson eat. And if you have to, and if you have the luxury to, you stick to the ground game and let Josh Jacobs continue to do what he's doing. You paid him those dollars for a reason. They have the ability to do that, and the O-line is doing it. So the Packers offense to me in this one is the slight edge for them. I think they'll be able to get up on the Texans and force them to be more one-dimensional than they want to be. So if anybody's hanging out with us in the chat, you guys throw your predictions up for this game. We're coming to the end of this one, so let us know what you think is going to happen here. I'll toss out mine, get us going. So last week against the Cardinals, just we're not keeping record like we did last year, Tim, but week to week we can be reflective. I did say I thought it was going to be a 35-30, I believe was the prediction. So Packers almost got me on that, right? They got 34 points. The defense definitely held up more than I thought they would. I feel similar to this game. I'm going to say the Packers 38, the Texans 31.
Okay, that's certainly a shootout.
Yeah, I think, and then I think probably the majority of that happens in the second half. I think the first half there's some feeling out. Maybe you get a score each, something like that, and then the second half just gets going. So we'll see. What do you think, Tim?
I'm going to take the Packers. I'm going to take it a little lower scoring than that. I'll say 27-24, though. Saying that, I realize they have to make 2 field goals, and that concerns me. Because any field goal is, it's an adventure. And we didn't even talk about Narvison. And
what is there to say? He missed kick. It's just like, wow.
I don't know how much more you can live with this. But yeah, 27-24. Maybe he makes like a 31 yarder and a 34 yarder. I think he's capable of that, but who the hell knows? But the Packers win a close one. I think a couple things. I think Texans will try to run the ball early on them and see if they can rip off some runs. And if they do, they'll probably stay with it. And I also think they're going to attack them over the middle of the field. And that's play action. That's attacking their linebackers and their nickel backs and coverage. I think that those are the key areas. Like if they can limit the damage in the middle of the field and keep the linebackers from being exposed in coverage, that's going to go a long way. And then I think offensively for the Packers, it's holding up against those edge rushers. I think Zach Tom's been a stud this year. And I really like Rasheed Walker too, but they got big tests this week. So if they can hold up on the edge, and then I think Jordan Love, I don't think this is the week for like explosive plays. Like we saw Christian Watson's big touchdown. That was awesome. I think this is the week for like manage the game. Don't force the issue down the field if it's not there. I think there were 5 or 6 plays against the Cardinals where I just was like, all right, take the completion. And he did. And that to me was encouraging. Whether it gained, 6 or 7 yards, it wasn't the big play, but it was like, okay, he's taken the completions more than I think he did earlier in the season, where he was trying to find the bigger plays in the intermediate or deep part of the field. And I think that's what's going to be against Houston, is like, just take the completion. And if you have to go 9 or 10 plays to score a touchdown, do that. You don't need to always be hitting a 40-yard bomb. Like, just take what's there and be smart with the football and be accurate. So I'll take the Packers 27-24. I think it's going to be real close. But I think they're going to find a way to pull it out. I think it's going to be a game that lives up to expectations. It's going to be a real nice game for Jordan Love and CJ Stroud too.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with that. I think you're right. It's probably not the week for big plays, although this offense is so built for it. I think that they will still try to find a few of those haymakers to throw. But yeah, I would agree that the winning recipe here is, control the ball, keep it on the ground if you can. You don't necessarily have to shorten the game, but if you can, I think it plays in your favor.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I agree with that. I can see that. And then our buddy Matthew Tan's got a prediction for us: 27-20 Packers. Matthew, I think your bias is showing, man. You never pick anybody besides the Packers. Come on. Absolutely love it. Yeah, 27-20 would be a good score. Just bring us a win, and I would say let's prepare for mistakes to be made. This is a good team in the Texans, right? Like, just because it was an awesome game against the Cardinals and they just look invincible and everything, like, they're going to come back. They'll make some mistakes. There'll be some things like, oh no, why did he do that? What are we doing? Got to be ready for those. I want to see them win this game. If they can win this game, man, that's a good win right there. I don't think it matters how it happens. That's a good win. That's a good one to really build on right in the middle of the season, right before you start getting closer to some more division matchups. So yeah, that would be a really a statement, I think, for the Packers here. So, all right, man. Well, that's it for this one. We're not going to drag this on. Last week we went almost an hour and a half. We won't go too much further. I know, Al, you're probably sitting there like, man, 12 minutes. You guys are getting I know. We're trying, man. We're going to get it back to an hour, I promise. But if you hung around with us this long, thank you so much. We do appreciate y'all listening, subscribing, hanging out with us, getting in the comments, getting involved in the Packers talk here, and just enjoying some Packers football, man. We went through the drought of the offseason, and we've made it here. We've got some winning Packers football. We're having fun. Everybody's catching touchdown passes. And everybody's getting turnovers. There's all sorts of stuff. We're having all the fun. So if you're not enjoying this, you're probably just not a Packers fan. And I'm not, no shots fired, but just do a little self-reflection there. Enjoy this. This is the time to do it. But yes, please definitely come back next week. See what happened. Did they get the win? If they did, what happened? If they didn't, what happened? What are we going to do about it? All the things, solve all the problems. Until then, please check us out on YouTube. That is the Packers Talk YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. Spike that like button for us here tonight. And then go follow us on all the other socials. Y'all know how to do all that. Just click all those buttons. Help us out. You know it. And please come on back next week, y'all. Go, Pack, go.